in.
Oh, sure, that's fine. I was just trying to make sure everything lined up.
Yeah, it looks good. It looks good.
Nice design.
I want to turn the. Where is everybody?
Hey, Gloria.
I,
Here come the judge. Here come the judge.
I'm sure he's never heard that before.
It's music to my ears.
Hey, Judge, how you doing?
Well, I've had 5 eviction trials so far today, and they're not enjoyable to do.
No,
I'm telling you, my baby is only 1 month old and this or that, and I'll be out on the street.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
That's eviction work is, I'm used to judges asking me to do the evictions around Christmas because it's not something a politician wants to engage in. But it's not so bad at this time of the year. It's warmer out, so at least they won't be that cold.
Hmm.
Well, John, I don't know if you remember, but we planted an oak tree here about 20 years ago, and it ought to be tall enough now. It has some limbs that we can put a rope in it and hang people. Will that
Well,
make life a little easier for you? Just go ahead and declare them guilty and hang them today. Don't have
I
to put 'em up.
will forward your suggestion to our governor. He might be interested.
Well, I'd like to see him hanging from that tree. Does that count for anything? Actually, he has a bad reputation with trees. I understand that's what fell on him when he hurt his leg.
Exactly.
No, I thought you were going to say build a tree house, Tommy.
Well, I still have that on my bucket list for the lake. I think it's going to be for great grandchildren instead of just grandchildren. They're a little old to climb in a tree house.
Well, folks, it's 12:30 and we finally have some more members available. So I'm going to call to order the oldest Lions Club in the world. And we're going to stand and do the pledge. And I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves except for whoever's doing the pledge. And I was wondering, Judge, would you do the pledge for us? Would you lead us in the pledge?
No, I rather defer to Tommy.
Okay, Tommy, would you lead us in the pledge? And the
Of
rest-
course I will.
All right, and the rest of you mute yourself.
Is this the John Whistler version of
Wait
the pledge?
just a second.
All right, please remove your hat or hand over your heart as you will and follow after me. What are we gonna get?
Wait a
the
minute,
words up
wait a
there?
minute, wait a minute, wait a minute,
Just
wait a
remember.
minute, wait. I'm trying to get organized here. Here we go.
We're ready.
Yeah, but I'm trying to get ready. Where'd you go? Oh, never mind. Heck with it. I don't know where it went. Oh, okay, we're doing it again. I have a lot of trouble with this thing. I don't know why.
I think Tommy knows the words. He doesn't need the
Why don't we
teleprompter.
just
I believe
stay?
so.
I can put it on a flag. A flag is easy.
All right, let's follow me. I pledge allegiance to the
To the
flag
flag of the United States of America,
and to the
the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible,
Indivisible.
with liberty
liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Yeah, there you go.
Amen. Hook 'em. Texas flag.
Texas flag, I gotta get one.
Pledge allegiance to the
I'm not
Texas
good at
flag.
flag.
You better get yourself.
Go ahead.
Honor the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag.
I pledge
Allegiance to the
Flag.
one state, under God, indivisible. Amen.
Oh,
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, today's Wednesday. Oh, no, it's Thursday. I thought it was Wednesday. I'm sorry. I was thinking it was Wednesday.
Put that day late. Okay.
I believe we're
Okay.
done.
All right, yes. All right, thank you, everybody, for participating in that. Okay, do we have any guests today? Any guests today?
Yes, do you see Kit? Sometimes I have to call him to remind
No,
him.
I don't see it.
I don't, yeah.
So can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
All right.
You look good too.
Man just came on. This is on.
Okay.
Looking at Kit.
Oh, our speaker is here. Wonderful, wonderful. It's always great when the speaker shows up. So,
You know, it's in a security place.
we'll wait to introduce you later on, if that's okay with you, Colonel.
No worries. I just wanted to
Salinas? Okay,
say hi.
great. Okay, thank you.
Just okay.
Do we have any other guests?
That's okay.
Okay, we have one birthday today and it's Patty Robinson. Can you click on to Patty? Patty, raise your hand. Yay.
We gonna sing.
Absolute. Why not? Happy
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Betty. Happy birthday to you.
And many more. Okay, all right. Okay, great,
So
great,
much.
great,
I
great.
appreciate that.
Pardon me?
I said-
Sorry,
Thank you
What?
so much. I appreciate that.
you're welcome, you're welcome. And I want to thank Mim again for the cake she brought last week. That was really enjoyable. I enjoyed that a whole lot to have the cake. I think everybody did too. Okay,
Patty, how many more days till your next milestone?
I retire on the 31st of May.
Okay.
And then I'm going to take your advice and never set an alarm again. Of course, unless I have to go to the airport.
That's right, Patty. We get angry if someone calls at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Ooh, I'll remember that. Okay, as far as announcements go, we have several announcements. I want to tell y'all that the entire slate of officers was approved, and the new officers will be taking effect July the 1st. Patty, would you go first? Would you tell us about the Lions King?
Yes, the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired's drama department is doing the Lion King Jr. And that will, they'll have 2 dates for live presentations on the 29th and 30th of April at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. Please come if you can. Tommy and I have been working on, I've been working on costumes. Tommy's been working on decorations and he built the cliff.
Well, great. Okay, Tommy, would you tell us about the bench, please? And you're muted, Tommy.
Let's try this again. Good news and bad news. First of all, we had gotten approval from the Parks Department originally to put the bench along with our drinking fountain adjacent to the playscape that we put in. Unfortunately, about 3 weeks after we had the review and approval, we got a disapproval from the chairman of the, and I guess he's director of the master plan study for Zilker. And he said he did not have a bench there and we were not going to be allowed to do it. I told him he could go take a long walk on a short deck, and we got into a little bit of a discussion, and I appealed to his boss and he was overruled. But the overruling came with a condition that the bench be there only 2 weeks and then be relocated to the caretaker's cottage.
Okay. Come on, close it. Be in there.
Are you the program or am I? Enough? Okay. Anyway, to the caretaker's cabin. I went and looked at the caretaker's cabin, and it is actually just a surplus materials yard for all of the landscaping work, and it is totally inappropriate. So I appealed to them again, and they said, take the 2 weeks or leave it. And so we are leaving it. We then appealed or asked for permission to put it at the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and they readily accepted it. And what they want us to do, I'm going to show you a picture. This is the brand new pavilion that I did for them, and it was dedicated here almost a year ago, I guess. And it really originally had 12 benches in it, but we didn't have enough money. So our bench will be an appropriate addition to that. They're excited about having us. I will take care of it. Now, would you like to see what the bench looks like? It is behind me. It is right there, if you can see it. It is a wonderful bench, good and sturdy, hard cut, just absolutely perfect for it. I will in fact have the anchoring, and we'll also have the plaque that is going to go on it probably in about a week and a half. So I will give you a picture and a report, and then the line boss is going to schedule a dedication event, and we will have balloons and flowers and drinks and a whole bunch of things, probably after one of our Thursday meetings, just to walk over and do it then. We will tell you more later, but we now have our bench. Hooray, and congratulations to those of you gathering up plastic. Glenda, Robert, the guys that did it. That's my story. Stick it to it.
We had lots of help. JP was one of the people that got a lot of
Oh,
plastic too. So I think this is going to be a great way to get some publicity, and I think it's a nice thing to do. And we have already started on our next bench, collecting on our next bench.
Oh, okay.
If anybody has any other ideas about where to put it, or Tommy says that it would look lovely, they could use it at the school also. But once people have started collecting, they don't want to stop. They feel so good about it. They feel like they're really contributing to the community, and they are. So let me know if you have any other ideas. Otherwise, our second bench will go.
You win.
First bench. Okay, do we have any other? That's all I have in the way of announcement. Oh, no, I want to remind you about the convention in New Braunfels, April 29th and the 30th. I have 6 delegates lined up to represent us. And if you still want to go to this late date, get in touch with me, because I'll need to get you a form. Does anybody
Gwen, I have a question about the plastics. Who do we call to tell how many pounds we have?
Greg Dew is doing that.
Greg is doing it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's fine. Because we have 2 bags ready to go.
Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, and our time started already, so we have 6 months from, I think it was April 1st, to get another 500 pounds. So keep at it, folks. Doing a good job. Yeah, call Greg and he'll keep, he's keeping track of it. All right, do we have any other announcements that need to be made before we go into our program? Tommy, you look like you're going to say something.
I did say something, but it got muted out. Just want to remind everybody that on the 28th, we will be going to the Austin Independent School District main office, their boardroom. Food will be served at no cost, and we will have the presentation of the 6 $500 scholarships to the clubs, to the schools named after our club members. Just put that on your calendar. We need a good attendance. It's the 28th of the month. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I had that on the agenda, but I'm glad you, I had it under important dates for your calendar, but I'm glad you reminded us of it. Okay, I'm looking for Drew Schreiberly to introduce our program today. Drew, are you here?
I am.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Would you introduce our program for us, please?
Yes, I would. And Lion, Chuck, I had sent you the presentation for Colonel Salinas, and I wanted to see if you had received it, sir.
Chuck, you're muted.
You know, Drew, if it's okay if they I can bring it up also, if that makes it easy.
Okay, can we enable Colonel Salinas to advance his slides?
Chuck is muted. I can't get him to,
Okay.
He can put his slides up.
okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure that Colonel Salinas uses his commander's voice as well, so he can articulate with his words as well as images. We've got a really fantastic opportunity today to listen to Colonel Martin Salinas, and many of you have his bio, have seen his bio. So I won't speak too much to that, other than to say that he's the Chief Operating Officer for AFWorks, which is an Air Force research laboratory right here in Austin, Texas. he's a graduate of Texas A&M, and he's had an amazing career, most recently being promoted to colonel, served all throughout the world in support of freedom, and has an amazing set of stories. And every time I listen to him, there's something that just blows my mind that he's working on. So I want to be able to give him as much time as possible and just say that I think you're really, I don't want to set the bar too high, but you will never hear anything as amazing in your life as you hear from Colonel Martin Salinas. Sir?
You okay?
I don't know. I don't hear him.
I don't hear anything.
We can't hear you.
Colonel Salinas, we see that you started screen sharing, but we don't see anything on the screen.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, it's telling me I've got to pause it and then you can hear me. So this is a little bit, as much as we deal with technology, that's a fairly new one to me, but no worries. I only have a handful of slides here, so we'll just try to get through them. So again, thank you, Drew. Colonel Martin Salinas here, really generous introduction there. I appreciate it. And so yeah, went to Texas A&M, and it is an honor to speak to the oldest Lions Club. I think it was in the world, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's great to virtually meet all of you and speak to you. Hopefully, at some point in the future, we can, meet in person at some venue. So I work currently downtown Austin. I'm at the house today with gas prices. I'm trying not to travel unnecessarily back and forth to work. So working out of my home office here, and again, came over here from Florida, moved over, was working in operational test in the Air Force, and had this opportunity to come to this innovation organization called AFWorks and kind of stand up and grow our opportunities here in Austin. As you all know, I mean, Austin is just becoming the next, we call it the Silicon Hills, the next Silicon Valley. A lot of great opportunity here. In the slides ahead, I'll try not to speak too much of jargon. I'll try to just get after what we're doing and what makes it interesting. I'll let this be as conversational as all of you would like. Please, I don't know if there's a procedure here, if you kind of voice in or raise your hand or something, but feel free to jump in as you'd like. I'll move the slide. I may have to unmute and mute. Let me see if I can do this here. All right, you still hear me?
We don't see your slides though.
We don't see your slides.
All right, let me see what I can do. Screen sharing is paused. Man, it is giving me a hard time.
Can you help him?
I'm going to try to help it in a minute. Right, download the slides.
How about now? You see the new screen?
No.
Huh. I don't know why it is doing that. Let me, it's telling me I've got it shared. Well, maybe, would you, Mr.
Chuck, if you have his PowerPoint, maybe you could.
Okay, I'm getting this PowerPoint now. I thought I had already downloaded it, but I got a joke to tell Colonel Salinas.
Well, I can just speak to it. Really the visuals are for fun, but I'm happy to just speak to them if that's okay with everybody. So while we're working on that, so we have an interesting organization. It's fairly new. It was stood up in about the 2018 timeframe, and the intent of it was to build a culture of innovation within the U.S. Air Force to keep pace with a lot of the new technologies that were being developed by our peer adversaries, obviously from China and Russia. And we found that from a military perspective, we weren't doing a good job of capturing some of the leading edge capabilities that existed in our commercial industry. We also saw that we were losing some ability to have a lot of that organic small defense industrial capability within the United States. And we looked at it from an Air Force perspective and thought, surely we could do this better. We could partner with our small industrial startup base, our small businesses, look to try to fund some interesting ideas, take some bets on those ideas, and see if we can start to, I think I see the screen coming up here, with that industry partner and us, if we can help build out those companies, those capabilities that have dual use technology from both an Air Force perspective and also a very commercial use case, then I think we would be, lead further into assuring that we maintain our leadership in technology across the globe. So we set off to do that in the 2018 timeframe. We developed an organization called we are AFWorks, but what AFWorks, what we call 1.0, was essentially an organization that reached across the different parts of the U.S. Air Force and built an innovation culture, provided resources to those folks, reach back support for training, because as you all know, a lot of people have great innovative ideas, but without support, they tend to get crushed by the system, by the bureaucracy. And we were trying to work towards helping them have a structure of support and a little bit of funding to try new things. So we did that. It was actually pretty wildly successful. A lot of things had changed. The issue was going forward is that scaling those ideas was relatively difficult. So that was, and I'll speak to a little bit more about that. But the interesting thing is those were our airmen and our guardians. We've got about over 90 of those innovation cells all across the world with our Air Force airmen and guardians. In harnessing the power of about 40,000 of our folks. So very powerful there. We have another organization that we call AF Ventures. And the bottom line with AF Ventures is we've got small business innovation and research funds that we have available to us from the SBA, from the Small Business Association. And we use those dollars. We have a little under $1 billion that we invest annually in these small American companies. Again, those companies that have a technology that we find, one, it's a solid technology. Two, it has a really strong commercial use case. And three, we can make a good case for its government or military utility. We bring in about 1,600 of those companies a year, almost 3,000 contracts in general. Some of which are some do move up in the process. There's some of the same companies because they start off as what we call a phase one, which some of you may be familiar with. It's just a white paper, an idea. We throw a little bit of money at that. There's a larger amount of those contracts out there, approximately up about 1,000 of those a year. About 400 of those we call about a phase two, and those are folks that have developed that idea into a prototype, and they've developed a customer base, and they're really starting to get some legs underneath them. At that point, they're supposed to we help them as much as we can find a partner in the government to sign a support letter that just says, hey, we think this is a good idea. And if it continues to go in the right direction, we'll look at the possibility of doing what we call a phase three, which is essentially hey, we're going to purchase it. We're going to put it in action with the military. So there's about 400 of those we call a phase two, and we brought in about in fiscal year 21, we brought in almost 300 companies into a phase three. So they basically made it all the way through success and have a strong relationship with their product in our hands. So pretty helpful there. So we call that F Ventures. That's one, the second area that I wanted to mention. The third is what we call Prime. And really what that is looking across the board, finding a technology that we find interesting that maybe the Air Force isn't asking about, but what we do is look ahead, right? We're trying to look ahead and see maybe this is a leading edge capability that we need to start thinking about now, even if there is no requirement, and start setting the foundation to bring that in. That one that we started out with was the electronic vertical takeoff and landing aircraft we call eVTOLs. We think there's a strong case to be made for the electrification of aviation. We understand that battery technology, battery energy density has a ways to go still, and we're probably going to hit some walls there, but still worth exploring. What we didn't want to do is make the same mistake we made when we missed the boat on small drones. So you probably have all seen those little drones that folks fly. A lot of those small drones are Chinese made. That was starting to be developed in about the 2006 to 2012 timeframe. You probably saw them in Best Buy. And the Chinese really saw that market. Essentially, we missed the boat in the Department of Defense. It didn't see a real need for those. And now, if we look across the board, China has about 80% of that market globally, and I don't know if we'll ever catch up. And that supply chain, the manufacturing required to support those materials to create small drones are not in the U.S. Where I know Drew and his team are really working hard to bring a lot of that manufacturing capability to Texas. I think they'll make some seriously good progress there, but we're behind. We're really behind. And I think part of what could have helped that is if the Department of Defense, maybe the Air Force, recognized that was a capability that not only is beneficial to the United States, but also to defense, to the government. Those small drones are very helpful in providing, surveillance for us, right? As far as outside the U.S., when we're watching out for our bases and things like that. The interesting thing is, to give you one example, if I would have taken that small little drone and I would have brought it to a general or colonel back in 2000, let's call it 8. And I said, hey, you know what? This is an interesting technology. I know you don't have a requirement. What do you think about it? And the bottom line is they probably would have said, well, I don't have a requirement. So thank you. Good day. If I would have taken that same drone to, again, those airmen and those guardians down on the flight line or out in the field, like I was mentioning before, and I asked them the same thing, what could you have done with it? I bet you they would have come up with a lot of good ideas of how they could have used it to make their jobs easier. They would have used their imaginations, like, hey, I've got to get on this ladder, or I've got to get on this cherry picking machine to take me up to the tail of that aircraft, and I got to, physically inspect it. But if I had this little drone, and the time it would have taken me to do one of these things, I could have inspected, 10 of them. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to think about. We're empowering our people to come up with those good ideas, to think about these leading edge technologies in ways we never imagined. One, to either replace what you're doing, enhance what you're doing, and most importantly, do something different that we never even thought of before. And I think the power of our people are going to help us out with that. So what Prime did is said, let's find one of those technologies. It was the electronic vertical takeoff and landing, the electrification of aviation. And then let's put all of our energy behind it. Let's find some leading edge companies. Let's invest in them. Let's get them access to some of our leading experts, our laboratories, our flight test pilots, our operational test expertise, all of those things, and really excel. And these are American companies, and accelerate them as hard as we can, as fast as we can, to an operational and a commercial success. Keep that technology in the U.S. And maintain that leadership here in the United States. So we've been wildly successful. There are different folks out there with different metrics of success there. One of the things I have heard is that the predictions for that market was to have commercialization by 2030. We're seeing, and again, I don't have an exact correlation. I don't think we can take credit for that necessarily, but we're seeing estimates now after the launch of this program, with our partnership with that industry, that objective timeline has moved left. Now we're thinking 2023 to 2024. And I'll tell you, we're already buying a handful of these aircraft and starting to put them out in some bases and start to run some testing. One of those companies, I think I can mention, is Lift Hexa, which is an Austin-based company just down the road. I think they do a lot of their testing out at the Pickle Research Center with Matt Chasen as their CEO. We've got their aircraft now out in one of our Eglin Air Force Base, Florida Panhandle bases, and we've started to set up a proving ground, looking at really, getting after exploring that technology. So I think it's been really successful. We're now taking that same model and applying it to other leading edge technologies. The next one we are interested in is space, right? That makes a lot of sense. And the next effort we are calling basically Space Prime. And we're looking at space debris remediation. So basically cleaning up space junk. And some people will ask, well, why do we need to do that? Well, I'll tell you, there's not a lot of real estate in space. And sometimes what's taking up that real estate where you want to put a satellite is another dead satellite. So if you could go out there and kind of take that satellite out of the sky, clean up the space debris, now you've given yourself more options to put more capability in orbit. So that's pretty interesting. We're looking at that. The funny thing is, when we launched that effort, we were trying to convince everybody that this is a good idea. That same week, Russia launched a missile into space and blew up a satellite and put about 40,000 pieces of debris in space. And we thought, well, you couldn't have helped make our point better. So thank you, Russia, for doing that. But we're getting after it. That's our next effort. We're really happy to be here in Austin. I think we found a lot of leading edge companies here. I'll end with one more thing, and I'll open it up for questions. We have a way of analyzing our locations and where we want to place ourselves and engage. We call it dial in. I'll give you the bottom line is we're really looking at, hey, are there defense partners out there? Is there some good industry partnership capacity? Are there good academic institutions? Are there investors? And are there local government and people who really want to get after some of this technological advancement? And we think we have a measure of 0 to 5 on every one of those. And I will tell you, Austin got 5s across the board in our in our analysis. So really happy to be here. Really happy to speak to all of you. And with that, I'll pause and take any questions you have.
I have a question. So does that mean then we are making some more things here that we would normally have to buy from China? So are we addressing that issue?
So that is, ma'am, that's a great question. We're trying to, right? And, so this is I will tell you, and I don't want to alarm you, but we are in a technological and commercial power struggle with China. So so it's interesting, on one hand, the answer is yes. On the other hand, we're investing in these companies, trying to help them into becoming a part of our small defense industrial base. But and when we get involved, when the DoD or the Air Force gets involved with one of those companies, it does attract investment, right? It attracts attention. And what's great about that is now we're not having to spend money on research and development. Private equity, private money folds into those companies, helps kind of give them some room to grow. But what you find sometimes is a Chinese company will come in and buy them, all right? Offer them a big sack of cash and say, we want to, hey, young 25-year-old, let me offer you $10 million for your technology. And how many of these folks are going to say no because I don't want it to go to China? So that's a tough one that we're dealing with. We call that predatory money. And there is some predatory money out there. There's actually predatory money looking into what we're investing, right? So we may be with a company. We actually have to bring in folks to do investigations to make sure that the companies that we're building relationships with don't have some sort of either a known or unknown relationship with outside entities that could be in China. So it's a little bit of a competition. I don't think a lot of folks, even within the Department of Defense, are understanding that it's pretty serious. But I know we're getting after it. I think we're all committed to bringing that capability, that manufacturing, and that investment back to the United States. And I'm sure Drew's got a bunch of good topics about how they're getting after that from the state of Texas perspective too.
John, Gaylord, unmute yourself. Anybody else want Gaylord unmute? Tommy? You're not muted, Tommy.
All right, great. Colonel, we appreciate everything that y'all are doing. In fact, I've heard a little bit about it. It's gone along. you get a lot of clarity to what you presented today. I just faintly remember back in the 60s or somewhere that we already had a vertical takeoff animal, and that the wings turned after they got up to a certain degree and then it would take off. Am I just imagining a cartoon? Or did that?
No, sir, you're correct. I mean, the technology itself is not necessarily new, right? The ability to do vertical takeoff exists. It exists today in using, you know, propellers and gas motors. What we're looking at, and one of the things is the electrification, right? Or maybe even hybrid approach, because what we're finding, and I think a lot of us are seeing this happen in real time in Ukraine, is that when the enemy wants to get after you and slow you down, they take out your ability to move fuel and bullets, right? So if you can get independence from fuel, and the bullets part is just it's your logistics capability, but they're really going to shut down your fuel capability. Like that's what they get after. Once you run out of fuel, you're done. So what we're looking at is how do we get independence from fuel just as a strategic imperative, right? So if we can electrify our vehicles, if we can electrify the aircraft, it reduces that threat to ourselves. And then we don't, you know, moving fuel around is pretty difficult too, right? There's no pipelines to some of these places. And what we end up doing is buying the fuel locally, which is good because it makes the locals happy we're there when we're buying their fuel. But if that gets shut down, you know, we're in trouble. So that's why we're looking at it. I think we're a ways out still, but it's really one of our imperatives for essentially, you know, runway independence. That's why we don't want to have to, you know, do a horizontal takeoff. We want to be able to land anywhere,
Right.
and we want to make sure that we don't have disruption, or if there are disruptions in our logistics supply chain, we can still operate.
Great, thank you.
Gaylord?
Yes, Colonel, thank you for your presentation. And I'm curious, given the extensive deployment of the use of drones, particularly, I guess, by the Ukrainians after the invasion by Russia, are you learning anything from what is reported and what's being demonstrated by the increased use of drones or any other technology for that matter? In other words, does technology in the field sometimes get ahead of our research?
That's a great question. Yes, sir. And I will say that we've learned a couple of things. And I'll tell you, I haven't gotten any classified briefings yet. I'm kind of on an island here a little bit. So a lot of what I'm telling you is open source and just from chatting with folks. But we're learning from both sides. We're learning from the Ukrainian side. We're learning from the Russian side. The problems that the Russians are running into and the wins on the Ukrainian side are both lessons to us. And I think what an interesting lesson is, you mentioned it, right? I mean, what Ukraine is using are pretty, I'm not going to say unsophisticated, but, you know, not super expensive, exquisite drone capability. They're just drones that have some missile launch some weapons capability and some surveillance capability. Almost off the shelf for some extent. I mean, most folks can get what they're buying through the right channels, but they're using commercial satellite imagery to track the Russians. The Russians are actually using cell phone towers and regular communication networks that, to be honest with you, any cell phone company can utilize, right? Can kind of find out what they're talking about. So the interesting thing is that a lot of what, and Russia's a superpower, right? So you've got a superpower essentially getting halted and in some ways defeated by a small country who's using a lot of off-the-shelf commercially available technology, which is super interesting. And it makes you start to wonder, you know, even from our perspective, where we're putting our investments in. And not that we should take away from some of our US exquisite capability, we should still keep it, but maybe look at what are other ways we can take advantage of some of those pretty easy to access capabilities that exist out there that you see the Ukrainians doing. So a lot of lessons there, definitely. And a lot of lessons about counter. If you look at what's made them successful, well, you want to be able to counter that too. So our ability to counter small drones is very interesting to us.
Colonel Mark, so I have a question. Do you have any enlisted people involved in your evaluation of these different ideas?
Absolutely.
I hope so.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Who else? Who else has a question? Mac, start you first.
Well, actually, Mark was first, and so I'm gonna,
Mark, okay,
Mark, you go, and then I'll go.
Sure, I'll go ahead. Colonel, I wanted to ask, what is the relationship between your Air Force program and the Army's Futures Command that is right here in Austin? What do y'all do like together?
That another great question. Yeah, one of our efforts since I've gotten here, since Colonel Jay Wisham got here, is we really want to work together. I think all of you expect that we're going to work jointly and not in stovepipes. We appreciate that, and it's a goal of ours. We're looking for opportunity. I think we also have different approaches. We've got about $1 billion in SBIR money. We can make some bets. We have a strategic imperative to grow the small defense industrial base. They don't necessarily. They have a smaller pot. They're a lot more focused. They've even said they're more boutique, and they kind of look at us like we're kind of like the Ford company, Ford Motor Company of this capability. But that said, we're looking for opportunities where we share. We tell each other what we're doing. We're looking at some capability where we can see into each other's portfolios. With radical transparency. We're looking at that. We think some of the initial teaming is really in data, right? Data is low-hanging fruit for us. We want to share our information. We want access to each other's information. That way we can see if they're parallel capabilities that we're both working. We can stop doing that and combine efforts. So we're getting after that. And the specific technologies, there's some things that overlap, like energy. Energy is a technology that both of us are interested in. Taking care of our people, all those technologies to help us care for our people and for the resilience. That's a shared goal. So finding those shared goals and finding those shared ways we can get after together has been a #1 priority for us.
Good, and I'll give you my address, and you can send that flying car to me.
okay, Brad, it's your turn.
Yeah.
It already knows your address.
Well, actually, Mark had my question, so that kind of got answered, but I got another one.
Okay.
So, and I hope that you didn't already answer this. I had to break for just a minute, but, and you touched on it that, it's interesting that the Russians are fumbling on the ground, but in other ways you hear that their technology is more advanced than ours, like with hypersonic weapons and so on. And so do you think that we're kind of behind the curve now militarily, technologically?
I will say we do not have the comfortable lead that we've had in the past. And we've probably, and this is my personal opinion, I think we were hyper focused on the war on terrorism. And we kind of forgot about those other capabilities. And so I would say there's some evidence out there that we've gotten behind in some key technologies.
Robert?
Can you hear me? First of all, Giga Maggies.
All right, good.
Also, what is the relationship? Do you have a relationship with the A&M Research Center that I know that they're increasing and they work real close with the Department of Defense?
So we're really interested in that relationship. I'll tell you, the Army's done a really good job of taking ground there. That's what they do well. I've gone out through some of the governor's office. I asked the president's office at A&M to have me head out there and go look at the Bush Combat Development Center, which I did happily. Always happy to get back to Aggie land. And we went out there to scout some opportunity, and we're looking at it. One of the things we do is we partner with academia. We're starting to partner a lot with UNT. We've got some, obviously from proximity, we're looking at opportunities with the UT. But there's just so much great capability in Texas. It's a matter of just taking advantage of all of it, and we're definitely interested in building some relationships out in Texas A&M.
Partnering with your commercial part, so that's the connection there.
Say that again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
They're partnering with the commercial part. So not only with education, but they are also partnering with the commercial
Absolutely.
part, which you say, will you be using the commercial?
Yeah. So one of our capabilities, and granted, the majority of our ability is through SBIR, so Small Business Innovation and Research Funds, and then the Small Business Technology Transfer, which is STTR, and STTRs are done through the universities. So yeah, when there are opportunities to use that funding with the university and a commercial partner, we definitely go after it.
I'd like to make a comment about Ukraine being an army officer. A lot of what's happening there has to do with the difference in the
I'll
people
be ready in about 5
and
minutes.
how they treat their people, and the fact that the Ukrainians allow their soldiers to think about what they're doing and to take initiative, and the Russians don't. So a lot of what's happening, the excess with the less sophisticated weapons, has more to do with human brain power than with anything else.
I couldn't agree more, yes, sir. We have a really amazing enlisted and professional enlisted corps in the United States, and I don't think we could be as successful without them.
And that's one of their weaknesses. It has been for many years.
Yeah.
Rudy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Colonel Salinas, thank you for your presentation today, and we offer our congratulations on your recent promotion. My question is that, well, concerning Ford Motor and General Motors, any effort being made to relieve some of the, we just can't build our highways fast enough, and maybe vertical, looking at cars in a vertical position might help. Anything happening on your drawing board along that line?
No, that's, that is an interesting and terrific that you brought that. It's funny. I just got back last week from speaking to the Choctaw Nation about these same topics up in Oklahoma. And it's funny. That's what they talked about. The expense that we put into the streets, the concrete facilities and all that. You start moving into, and maybe in the future, it's not necessarily all electric. Maybe it's hybrid. Maybe it's something else. But as you start to relieve the roads by moving mobility to the sky a little bit more, you start relieving the impact on that infrastructure need, right? So that is something that's on our mind, the infrastructure requirement for these aircraft, and then, the relief that provides to the roads. It's something we're thinking about. Granted, we don't get too deeply involved. That's that's obviously a local municipal effort, but we definitely like to see that if we're helping move those technologies, they're providing value to local economies. So definitely on our mind.
Thank you.
Gaylord.
Yes, just a quick follow-up. Help me understand, Colonel, how you're going to utilize electricity for the vertical takeoff and landing. And here's what I've kind of got in mind. And a lot of the work that I've done in representing various groups that have wind power, and they need to be able to store that power until they can transfer it at the appropriate time to the power plant. How are you technically going to utilize electricity in vertical takeoff and landing vehicles?
Yeah, so I mean, right, if we went straight electric, right, it would probably be batteries. Now batteries aren't there, right? And I think we still got a ways to go with battery energy density. But you bring up a good point. This is a point that's on our minds. We don't have the infrastructure. And we probably need microgrids. And to be honest with you, in order, let's say we had to support it today. Let's say all the aircraft were ready and they could fly for miles and carry all kinds of payloads. It would take us a long time and a pretty big investment to set up the infrastructure to charge all those aircraft. And I don't even know if we could get there. I think what we're going to need is some microgrids. I'll be honest with you. I'm a big proponent of some local small, and I hope nobody smack me through the video here, but a microgrid of nuclear capability. So portable nukes, nuclear capability, which I think it can be done a lot safer nowadays. I think you got to look at that. You've got to have small microgrids. Texas has a very independent grid. Bring that capability back in a safe manner. There's also a lot of interesting capabilities out there of what you can do with the spent material from those things. But I think it's something you have to look at. You have to look at microgrids. You're gonna have to look at how you increase and power those areas better than the grids we have right now, because I don't think it'll support that capability as is. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Steve has been asking.
Oh, Steve.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chuck, and thank you, Colonel, for a wonderful presentation, for your service. I guess the question I had kind of tied into what you were just referring to about batteries. So is there, because there might be a finite resource, at least at this point of the portability of this, do we have to worry about rubbing up against people who may not be direct adversaries, but maybe may not be fully aligned with us as a country? So, I mean, you know, we do a lot of business with a lot of people we don't fundamentally agree with already. Or do we think we can harvest all of this ideally as homegrown materials? And then I guess the second part of it too is, part of me feels like the climate approach that collectively everyone's trying to achieve might help give you guys that arm up too, because you're going to have, you know, a lot of political will behind this, regardless of what side of the aisle people are on. It's my thought. So.
Yeah, I think so. So you bring up some good points. Again, how you approach this politically, or you know, from a U.S. policy perspective, yeah, I think you look at two things. Not that I'm a politician here, but I think you look at obviously bringing as much of that domestic capability back here. But I think we also have a lot of great partners, right? I think you know, and they just can't all be in China. You know, we've got some great European partners out there, some other folks who can do some great manufacturing too. And I think we all recognizing the fact that we need it. We've all, between our allies and us, have become way too dependent upon a single source, and that is China. So I mean, it has to get done. And I think you're right. I think from an environmental perspective, that's attractive on one side of the aisle, you know, and I think on the other side of the aisle of having independent manufacturing brought back to the U.S., which are, you know, these are probably higher tech manufacturing jobs. These aren't your standard, old school factory jobs. These are decent jobs. You know, these are good to bring back to the United States. So I think there's value there, both in the U.S. and both with our partners.
Steve, I know that there's been a big drive for better batteries. When I joined the Department of Energy in 1975, they were already up to their ears looking for better batteries, and everybody's been looking for better batteries since then.
I think of, Bolivia and Nevada, which normally you probably wouldn't put those two places in the same basket, but because of the lithium mines, and I believe that's the material that they both have, right? I mean, that they're very rich in.
That's current technology, but it has its limits.
Cobalt, there's a couple places where we have a limited amount of that resource. So the precious or scarce metals is an issue, but even just getting down to battery energy density, right, is another issue. With the physics behind battery energy density, we're going to keep running into the gravitronic energy. How much weight per power that you can provide. And I'll tell you, we are actively searching for some alternatives to that too. So there's other ways to attack battery capability, a little bit better than lithium. I mean, lithium ion gets flammable, right? You crash a bunch of lithium ion batteries, you want to get off that aircraft very quick. So there's a lot of things we're looking at, less flammable, looking at how do we get to higher energy density, hybridization, right? There's utility there in making hybrid aircraft. So all of those things are interesting to us.
I would think solar panels on planes, can't there be some, I don't know. I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but you're closer to the sun, and couldn't you just potentially harvest it that way also? I guess, but maybe not traveling at such a high speed. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just the energy density you can get from panels.
Yeah.
Or the energy flow. I'm not an electrical engineer, but I wish I was 1 year at A&M as an electrical engineer.
That's why I'm a liberal arts major, because I'm great at studying what already happens. Don't come to
my
me.
understanding is you just can't get the battery. You can't get the energy output.
Anybody else?
I have one more question.
John,
I always think it's interesting to know where people are from. You have such an interesting background, but where were you born? Where are you from?
That's a great question, ma'am. So I'm a military brat. I was actually born in Naples, Italy.
Oh.
My dad was stationed there. It's where he met. He actually grew up here in Texas, in San Antonio. Joined the Air Force, got stationed in Naples, Italy. Met my mom, and then married her, had me there, and then brought her back here. She naturalized as a citizen and got her citizenship. And and I joined the Air Force. My brother joined the Air Force. A couple of my uncles and cousins, and so been all around. I was in Alaska for high school, and then I decided I wanted to get a little bit south from there and get back to Texas. So I went to Texas A&M and enjoyed that time, and happy to be back in Texas.
Great, very nice.
John, did you ever hear enough? John, nice.
Yeah, let me, just one quick question, has to do with traffic control. For the surface transportation that we have now, we have a pretty simple, straightforward issue. A lane going and a lane coming, it's divided by a yellow line. And so everybody has a good idea of where they're supposed to be and where they're not supposed to be. With the increase in volume of the traffic of the kind of vehicles that you're talking about, traffic control is not going to be so simple.
Right.
What thinking has been given to that issue that's certainly going to grow?
That is the number one thing on our minds in the advanced air mobility space. So NASA is really, every conference I go to, it's all the same folks, all of us from the same group of folks from NASA, the same groups from the FAA, Department of Transportation. We're talking about that. There's some ideas out there how we get after that, the communications infrastructure need, the see and avoid capability.
Zoom call through in 10 minutes.
I think it's in some ways easier to manage than the ground, because the ground has more things that can happen. You know, when you're flying an aircraft, you don't have to worry about a neighbor's ball flying into the street and a kid running after it, right? So there's some things that are less random up in the sky other than birds. So you have a little bit more control. But the other problem you have is, you have lesser dimensions on the ground than you have in the air. You have to worry about falling out of the sky. So that's one thing. But the control is definitely an issue. The flight management process is something we're actively looking at. NASA's got some great research on that. The FAA is looking at it. The certification of the aircraft are another portion of this, and then what kind of equipment they need. Do they see and avoid each other? I think there's a lot of talk about that they're going to have to do that, because one of the things you have to think about when you're flying, if any of you fly, is a non-cooperative target, right? Or non-cooperative aircraft. It's great if we're all cooperating and communicating, we're all linked up and synced up. But when that one aircraft or who knows what is coming out there and is not cooperating, well, what do all the other aircraft have to do? And I think the popular thought is everybody else has to get out of its way and figure out a way around it. You have to kind of default to the non-cooperative thing. And that's the safest option. So a lot of great philosophical discussions happening from a lot of very intelligent folks there. I think we're getting after. There's a lot of testing happening. We're doing some great testing up in North Texas, trying to figure out how you do it. But yeah, another great question and something we're really looking to solve.
Jim?
Thank you.
Hold on. He left. Anybody else? Any more questions? Okay, Gaylord, unmute yourself.
Thank you for letting me ask a follow-up question to John's question. Colonel, if automobiles are now able to have detectors that automatically stop the car from a collision with another vehicle, would there not be some type of technology available or that could be developed that would cause these airborne cars, if we could call them that, detecting each other in time to avoid that collision?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we are getting after is that has to happen, right? So the aircraft have to have the capacity to what we call see each other and avoid each other. And it's because here's what we all say. We think there's going to be a mix between manned flight in those spaces and unmanned flight. At some point in the future, autonomous flight, or at least automated flight. So all of those aircraft have to be able to detect each other, avoid each other, and find alternative routes in a cooperative manner, right? So absolutely yes. I'll just get back to my previous point. The hardest part of that is not the cooperation, other than finding a standard that everybody agrees upon, because we're going to have a common standard, in the sky. The other part of it is really the non-cooperative target, the non-cooperative aircraft, and how you deal with that. But I think that same system helps you deal with it.
Thank you for indulging all my questions.
Roberto?
Roberto? I just want to say Gigamag is and the core is going to have a reception in 2 weeks. You're going to be there?
I didn't know about it, but I'd love to be there.
Well, I think our time is just about up. If anybody if we have one more question or move on.
want to add that I'm class of 60 and then I'm going to shut up. Class of 60.
All right.
All right. Our next week's program is, Mim, are you here to introduce our program for next week? I don't see Mim.
No.
Anyway, our next week's program is going to be on UT Harry Ransom Center, and the speaker is going to be Maggie Gilberg, but this is going to be a Zoom meeting also. So I hope that all of y'all will tune in for that next week. I want to remind you that we're going to have a board meeting next week, April the 21st. So if you have anything to bring to the board, let us know. And then Tommy had mentioned that on April the 28th, we will be meeting at the boardroom at AISD, and lunch will be provided. And we'll talk a little bit more about that next week at next week's program. And then remind you that our District 2S3 convention is in New Braunfels, is April the 29th and the 30th. And if you haven't signed up, let me know because we're definitely running out of time. Does anybody else have anything that we need to talk before we adjourn? Yes, yes.
Could
Yeah,
I ask a question maybe of anybody that would know? This is really kind of far out there, but we read about the horrific things developing in Ukraine. Is there a Lions Club or Lions clubs in Ukraine? And if so, do we have any reports about what they're doing, how they're doing? I hate to have such a vague question, but I think about, and we see these reports every day of the horrors that are occurring. I just wonder how our Lions Club brothers, if there are any in Ukraine, does someone happen to know that?
Gaylord, might add what you said there. We understand there were about 1,100 members in the country of Ukraine. Don't have any real feedback on what has happened to them, but the reality is they're probably being very ineffective if they're trying to do anything right now. There's just disruption in the communications and supply lines on civilian sides as well as military side. But there were about 1,100 Lions Club members, is what I understood.
Thank you, JP.
I got a notice by email, just practically when this thing started, from Lions International taking donations.
Yeah, LCIF is
yeah, so
is supplying, but they're having a hard time getting it in.
And that seems to be applying even to the military. I was discouraged to hear the report this morning about the 800 million additional military support that the United States has decided to provide, but commentators saying, unfortunately, that will probably be too late because even the light armor we sent previously took 4 weeks to get to the Ukraine military. And here they're thinking that obviously that Putin wants this success in his terms by May 9th, the celebration of the victory of Russia over Germany. And they said, too little, too late, we fear. But pardon my sad note.
We can only do what we can do. I mean, they're flying things in and trying to get it in there. We can only do what we can do. I'm sure we're trying very hard.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody for their good questions, and it is time to adjourn. And looking forward to seeing y'all next week and have some more good questions next week.
All right.
Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. Now we got some pictures.
Now we see what he's talking about.
That's the one I'm gonna deliver to my house. See y'all later.
You consider the way people drive their cars. I hate to think of what's going to happen when they get in airplanes. And as the Colonel said, when you get an accident in the sky, you fall out of the sky. Now you just stay on the pavement. Yeah. Okay, meeting's over, Glenda?
I think so. Yes. Yes. It was very, very interesting.
Yeah, this is Drew. I just wanted to say, could you imagine what Lion Leonard Passmore could have done with a long story about flying cars and people's driving abilities?
We can stay on. If you want to talk, keep talking. Yeah.
Yeah. All righty. Take care.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you again, everybody.